Apache woman was dragged to his ranch, but the rancher wasn't the monster she expected. The sun rose slowly over the wide, dusty plains, casting long shadows across the land. Birds called to each other in the quiet morning, and a gentle breeze stirred the dry grass. Among the soft rustling of the prairie, a young Apache woman named Nayeli walked along a narrow dirt path. She carried a small bundle with a few possessions wrapped in a cloth, holding it close as she made her way toward the edge of her village. The morning air was crisp, but the sun's heat promised another scorching day. Nayeli had grown up in this village, learning the ways of her people from her mother and grandmother. She knew how to gather herbs, read the land, and find water in hidden places. Yet, on this morning, her mind was elsewhere. She had been asked to take a message to a neighboring village, a simple task that seemed routine, but something in her heart whispered caution. Perhaps it was the loneliness of the wide plains, or perhaps it was the sense that not everything in the world was as kind as it seemed. Still, she set one foot in front of the other, determined to complete her task. The path wound through a narrow valley flanked by rocky hills. The wind carried the scent of sage in dry earth, and Nayeli hummed softly to herself, trying to calm the unease she felt. The journey was not dangerous in ordinary times. Travelers often passed this way without incident, but today, the air seemed heavy, almost watching her. Her eyes scanned the horizon instinctively, noting the shape of every rock, every shadow, as if preparing for a threat she could not name. After a while, she stopped near a small stream to drink. The water was cool and clear, running over smooth stones. She knelt on the bank, cupped her hands, and took a careful sip. The cold water refreshed her, and she let out a small sigh. It was moments like this that made her love the land. The quiet, the simple pleasure of nature, the feeling that she was part of something much larger than herself. She lifted her head and gazed at the hills, noting how the sunlight fell across the rocks, turning them gold. Then she heard a sound, faint at first, like the brush of fabric or soft footsteps. She froze, her senses alert. Nayeli's instincts, honed by years of wandering the plains, told her to be cautious. Slowly she stood and glanced behind her. The valley was empty, the path stretching back toward her village untouched. She shook her head, telling herself it was just the wind. Perhaps a deer had moved in the tall grass, or maybe it was nothing at all. She took a deep breath and continued walking. The sun climbed higher, and the heat became stronger. Nayeli's steps slowed as she adjusted the bundle on her back. She thought about her mother's advice. Trust your heart, but watch the land. It speaks to you if you listen. She smiled faintly, remembering the lessons of patience and observation. Even as she walked, she noticed the small details, the way a lizard darted across a sunlit rock, the way the grass bent under the wind, the distant call of a hawk. Each observation reminded her that life was everywhere, even in the quiet moments. Hours passed, and the path became less familiar. She recognized some rock formations, but others were new to her. The plains were open and beautiful, but they could feel endless. A sense of isolation settled over her. Nayeli reminded herself that she had walked longer and farther before. She was strong, capable, and smart. She had survived alone in the wild many times, and she knew she could do it again. Yet, she could not ignore the flicker of worry that appeared in the back of her mind. As she climbed a gentle hill, she noticed movement in the distance. Figures, perhaps people, were emerging from behind the rocks. Nayeli's heart beat faster. She had traveled alone before, but encounters with strangers were unpredictable. She slowed her pace, hoping to remain unnoticed. The figures moved closer, and she could see that they were men. Their faces were partially hidden, their intentions unclear. She felt a mixture of fear and resolve. Naeli knew she could run, but she also knew that the open plains could be treacherous if someone chased her. Her mind raced, thinking of all the possible outcomes. She considered hiding among the rocks, but there were few places to stay completely out of sight. She took another deep breath, steadying herself. Naeli reminded herself of the teachings of her grandmother. Even when the world seems uncertain, your spirit is your guide. Stay calm, and it will show you the path. She held tightly to those words, trying to quiet the nervous fluttering in her chest. As the men came closer, Naeli realized that they were not moving aggressively. Instead, they seemed to be watching her carefully, as if assessing something unknown. She tried to make herself appear small, calm, and non-threatening, hoping that her composure would influence their intentions. The sun blazed overhead, making the heat almost unbearable, and she wiped the sweat from her brow. Her senses were sharp. Every sound, every movement, and every shadow held meaning. One of the men called out in a voice that was surprisingly gentle. Naeli paused, unsure whether to respond. She remembered her mother's lessons about judging people by their actions rather than their words. She waited, her eyes fixed on the men, seeing the care in their movement and the hesitation in their approach. The tension was palpable, but there was no immediate danger. Naeli felt a mixture of relief and curiosity. They gestured for her to come closer. Naeli hesitated, thinking quickly. She had learned to trust her instincts, but also to weigh her options. Slowly, she stepped forward, keeping her hands visible and her movements calm. The men nodded at each other, speaking quietly among themselves. Naeli could not understand their words, but the tones seemed neither threatening nor harsh. One of them stepped closer and gestured toward a distant trail that led away from the village. She realized that they were guiding her somewhere, though the reason was unclear. Despite the uncertainty, Naeli's curiosity began to outweigh her fear. She remembered the stories of her people, stories of unexpected kindness, of strangers who helped rather than harmed. Perhaps this was one of those moments, she thought. She decided to follow the path they indicated, keeping her mind alert and her heart steady. Step by step, she moved across the sunlit plains, the wind ruffling her hair, and the tall grass brushing against her legs. As the journey continued, Naeli reflected on her life and her upbringing. She thought of the lessons her family had taught her about resilience, patience, and observation. She thought of the quiet moments by the fire, the songs sung under the stars, and the feeling of belonging to something greater. Even now, in this uncertain situation, she drew strength from those memories. They reminded her that she was capable of handling challenges and that her spirit was stronger than any fear. The day wore on, and the landscape slowly changed. The plains gave way to rolling hills, and in the distance, she could see a large ranch surrounded by fences and trees. The men guided her closer, and she realized that this was where they intended to bring her. Naeli's heart beat faster, but her fear was tempered by the sense that something unusual awaited her here, something that might not be as frightening as she had imagined. By the time they arrived, the sun was beginning its descent, casting long shadows across the ranch. Naeli looked at the buildings and the animals, feeling both trepidation and curiosity. She had expected danger, perhaps cruelty, but instead she saw a place of work and care, a place where life was sustained by effort and knowledge. The men led her to the main house, where a figure emerged from the shade of the porch, a man whose eyes were calm, observant, and neither hostile nor threatening. Naeli's heart pounded as she faced him. She did not know what to expect, but she sensed that this was a moment that could change everything. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in warm colors, And for the first time in hours, she felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this journey, which had begun in uncertainty and fear, would lead to understanding rather than harm. Nayeli drew in a deep breath, preparing herself for whatever came next, while also holding on to the quiet knowledge that her spirit was strong and ready to face the unknown. Nayeli stood on the porch, her heart still racing from the journey across the plains. The ranch before her was much larger than she had imagined, with wide wooden fences, barns, and a house that looked weathered but solid. Birds perched on the roof and trees swayed gently in the afternoon breeze. For the first time since leaving her village, she felt a mixture of curiosity and relief. Somehow, she knew that whatever awaited her here would be different from the fear she had imagined. The man on the porch stepped forward, and his eyes met hers. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with weathered hands and a calm demeanor. There was nothing threatening in his expression, only a quiet attentiveness. He spoke softly, in a voice that seemed to fit the peaceful rhythm of the ranch.
"You must be tired," he said.
"You need rest."
Nayeli hesitated. Her instincts still whispered caution, but she also sensed honesty in his tone.
The journey had been long, and the desert sun had left her body drained and thirsty. Slowly she nodded and stepped inside, following him through the doorway into a cool, shaded room. The interior smelled faintly of wood, herbs, and earth, a comforting combination. Sunlight filtered through the windows, highlighting simple furnishings and the neat order of the space. The man introduced himself as Tomas. He offered Nayeli a cup of cool water, which she accepted eagerly. The water felt like a blessing against the heat that had pressed on her all day. As she sipped, she observed Thomas moving around the room with ease, tidying small items, checking the windows, and making sure everything was in order. There was a rhythm to his movements, a sense that he cared for his surroundings and the life he had built here.
"You must have come a long way," Thomas said gently.
"Tell me about yourself if you want." Nayeli hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. Yet there was a sincerity in his eyes that made her feel safe. Slowly she began to speak. She told him about her village, the people she loved, and the task that had brought her across the plains. She spoke of her mother and grandmother, of the lessons they had taught her, and the quiet joys of life in the village. She spoke in simple words, letting the story unfold naturally, while Tomas listened with quiet attention. As she spoke, she noticed that Thomas never interrupted, never rushed her. He only nodded occasionally, showing understanding and respect. Nayeli found herself relaxing, her body easing from the tension of the long walk and the uncertain journey. By the time she finished speaking, she felt lighter, as if sharing her story had released some of the weight she had carried. After a pause, Thomas spoke. "You've traveled far, and it is not easy to walk alone. Here, you can rest and recover. No one will harm you." His words were simple, but they carried a sense of calm reassurance. Nayeli's eyes softened, and a small smile appeared on her face. For the first time in hours, she felt a measure of trust. Perhaps this man was not what she had feared. Perhaps he was someone who truly wished to help her. Over the next few hours, Tomas showed Nayeli the ranch. He led her past barns filled with animals, past fields of crops swaying in the breeze, and toward a small garden where herbs and vegetables grew in neat rows. Nayeli marveled at the care evident in every corner. The animals were healthy, the plants flourishing, and everything seemed to exist in harmony. She had never seen a place quite like this, where life and work intertwined so seamlessly. Tomas explained the routines of the ranch as they walked. "Every day has its tasks," he said. "Animals need care, crops need tending, and the land needs attention. But there is also time for rest and thought. The balance is important. Nayeli listened, absorbing each word. There was a rhythm to the ranch, a gentle structure that made her feel safe and grounded. As the sun began to lower in the sky, Tomas prepared a simple meal. Bread, fresh vegetables, and some milk were set before Nayeli, who ate slowly, savoring each bite. The taste of food, the warmth of the room, and the presence of someone kind created a sense of comfort she had not expected. It was a new feeling for her, being welcomed, being cared for, without fear or suspicion. After the meal, they sat together near the porch, watching the sun dip behind the hills. Nayeli noticed how the colors of the sky changed, soft oranges and pinks blending with the deepening blue. The world seemed calm here, almost magical in its quiet beauty. Tomas spoke quietly about the land, about the cycles of seasons, and the patience required to care for animals and crops. Nayeli listened, fascinated by the knowledge he shared, realizing how much effort went into keeping the ranch running smoothly. During their conversation, Nayeli began to see Tomas differently. He was not the figure she had imagined when she first arrived. He was patient, considerate, and surprisingly gentle. His strength was not in force or authority, but in the careful attention he gave to everything around him. She felt her initial fear slowly fading, replaced by curiosity and a desire to understand this man and his way of life. The evening air grew cooler, and the stars began to appear one by one in the vast sky above. Nayeli and Tomas walked a little further to the edge of the ranch, where the open plains stretched endlessly. The sight was breathtaking, and Nayeli felt a quiet awe. She realized how small she was in the vastness of the world, yet she also felt connected, as if the land itself acknowledged her presence. Tomas spoke softly about life and the choices people make. He shared stories of his past, of the challenges he had faced, and of the decisions that had brought him to this remote place. Nayeli listened, captivated by the honesty in his voice and the way he described life's lessons with simplicity and clarity. It was a side of humanity she had rarely seen, wisdom tempered by experience, kindness grounded in action. As night fell, Tomas prepared a place for Nayeli to sleep. A small room with clean linens awaited her, and she felt a comfort she had not felt since leaving her village. Before she lay down, she looked around the room, noticing small details, the careful arrangement of items, the simple but thoughtful decorations, and the quiet care that had gone into creating this space. She realized that every corner of the ranch reflected the same attention and care she had observed earlier. Lying on the bed, Nayeli reflected on the events of the day. She had traveled across the desert, faced uncertainty, and encountered strangers she did not understand. Yet by the end of the day, she found herself in a place of safety and unexpected kindness. The contrast between her fear at the beginning of the journey and the peace she felt now was striking. She realized that people could be surprising, that appearances could be misleading, and that understanding required patience and observation. Sleep came slowly, as her mind replayed the journey, the ranch, and the man who had welcomed her. Nayeli felt gratitude, curiosity, and a quiet sense of wonder. The world was vast and unpredictable, yet there were places of care and kindness, even in unexpected corners. She resolved to stay alert but open, to learn from this experience, and to carry the lessons forward. The next morning, Nayeli awoke to the sound of birds singing and the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze. Sunlight streamed through the window, filling the room with warmth. She dressed and stepped outside, feeling refreshed and ready for the day. The ranch already hummed with quiet activity, the animals moving about, the wind through the trees, and Tomas tending to morning chores. Nayeli felt a sense of belonging in this rhythm, even if only for a short while. Tomas greeted her with a nod and a smile. "Good morning," he said. "You rested well?" Nayeli nodded, smiling in return. His presence was reassuring, and she felt a sense of ease she had never expected when she first arrived. Together they began the day, each task a small step toward understanding the rhythms of the ranch and the life Tomas had built. As she worked alongside him, Nayeli began to notice more: the way he spoke to the animals, the careful way he tended to plants, and the quiet thoughtfulness in every action. She realized that this place was not just a ranch, but a reflection of patience, care, and balance. The experience was teaching her lessons she had never known, lessons about trust, observation, and the unexpected kindness of others. By the end of the day, Nayeli felt a deep sense of gratitude and a growing respect for Tomas. The initial fear and uncertainty of her arrival had transformed into curiosity and understanding. She had discovered that people were often more complex than first impressions suggested, and that trust could grow in small, quiet moments. As the sun set again, painting the sky in brilliant colors, Nayeli felt a sense of peace. She realized that her journey had only just begun, and that there were many more lessons to learn. Yet, for now, she could rest, knowing that the world could hold both challenge and care, and that the unexpected could sometimes bring the greatest gifts. Days passed on the ranch, and Nayeli's fear slowly faded as she observed the rhythms of daily life. Every morning she awoke to the soft calls of birds and the quiet movements of animals in the barns. Sunlight poured through the windows, filling her room with warmth. Each day felt like a gentle lesson in patience and observation, and Nayeli began to appreciate the quiet steadiness of the ranch. Thomas moved through his work with a calm precision. He fed the animals, checked the fences, and tended to the crops with careful attention. Nayeli watched him closely, noticing small details: the way he noticed when a plant needed water, the way he spoke to the animals, as if encouraging them with soft words. At first, she thought it was ordinary work, but she quickly realized that it was more than that. Every action was deliberate, purposeful, and full of care. The ranch was a living thing, and Tomas treated it as such. Curiosity filled Nayeli. She had never spent time in a place like this, where life moved in steady, careful patterns. In her village, people worked with the land, but there was always the bustle of daily life and the presence of neighbors and family. Here, the work was quiet, measured, almost meditative. She began to see how much effort it took to maintain balance, how much patience was needed to ensure that every animal, every plant, and every task received attention. Tomas noticed her observation. "The ranch asks for patience," he said one afternoon as they repaired a fence together. "It teaches you to slow down, to notice what others might miss." Nayeli nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. It wasn't just about fences or crops. It was about life itself. The ranch was a teacher, and Tomas was its guide. Despite the calm, there were moments when Nayeli's old habits of caution returned. She sometimes found herself scanning the horizon, expecting trouble that never came. She realized that fear was a natural part of life, especially after her long journey. But with each passing day she learned to temper it with observation, noticing the small signs of safety, the quiet order of the ranch, Tomas's careful movements, the animals' content behavior. Slowly, fear gave way to understanding, and understanding brought a tentative trust. Tomas began to include her in more of the daily routines. He showed her how to gather herbs from the garden, how to feed the animals, and how to check the crops for signs of need. Nayeli worked alongside him, her movements learning the rhythm of the ranch. She discovered that each task required patience, attention, and care, and she felt a quiet pride in her ability to contribute. Tomas praised her efforts gently, never in a boastful way, but in a manner that encouraged confidence and self-respect. One morning, as the sun rose and painted the sky with shades of gold, Tomas led Naeli to a small pasture where the youngest animals were kept. "They need extra attention," he explained. "Just like people, the smallest ones need care and guidance to grow strong." Naeli smiled, realizing that the lesson applied not only to animals but to life itself. She gently guided the young animals, learning their ways and listening to their quiet sounds. Each small success gave her a sense of accomplishment and belonging. Evenings were calm and reflective. Naeli and Tomas often sat together on the porch, watching the sun sink behind the distant hills. Sometimes they spoke about the land, sometimes about life, and sometimes they simply sat in silence. These moments were as important as the work itself, providing a space for thought, reflection, and quiet understanding. Naeli began to feel that the ranch was not only a place of work, but also a place of learning, a space where life revealed its lessons gently and without hurry.
Over time, Naeli noticed more about Tomas.
He was not only patient with the land, but with people as well. He never raised his voice, never demanded obedience, but instead guided with calm authority. Naeli realized that trust did not come from fear or force, but from consistency, honesty, and care. She began to reflect on her own life in the village, thinking about the ways she had been taught, the values she held, and the lessons she still had to learn. One day, as they worked together in the garden, Naeli asked Tomas about his life before the ranch. He paused, thinking carefully before speaking. "I've traveled far," he said slowly. "I've seen many places, met many people. Some were kind, some not so much. But I learned that the world is bigger than what we see, and people are not always what they seem." Naeli listened intently, realizing that his words mirrored her own experience. She had feared strangers, yet here she had found kindness. She began to understand that life was full of surprises, and that judging too quickly could close doors to learning and growth. As days turned into weeks, Naeli felt a growing connection to the ranch. She noticed the patterns of the seasons, the way the animals adapted to changes, and the small miracles of growth and life in the garden. Every task she completed taught her patience, and every observation taught her respect. The land became a teacher, and Tomas a guide, helping her navigate both practical work and the deeper lessons of care and observation. One afternoon, a storm approached. The sky darkened, clouds rolling in swiftly, and a gentle wind began to stir. Naeli and Tomas worked quickly to secure the animals and gather tools from the fields. The storm was powerful but brief, leaving behind a sense of freshness and renewal. Naeli realized that the storm, like life itself, could be unpredictable. But preparation, observation, and calm action could make even the most sudden challenge manageable. She felt a deep appreciation for the way Tomas handled the situation, and a quiet pride in herself for learning and assisting effectively. Evenings after the storm were especially beautiful. Rain droplets lingered on leaves, and the sun set against a sky of shifting colors. Naeli felt a sense of wonder at the natural world, realizing that life was a balance of calm and challenge, growth and learning. Tomas spoke little during these moments, letting the land itself tell its story. Naeli found that in silence, understanding could grow stronger than words. During these days, Naeli also began to notice subtle changes in herself. She felt stronger, more confident, and more aware of her surroundings. The lessons of patience, observation, and care were shaping her perspective. She realized that strength was not always shown through physical ability or loud words, but through calm persistence, thoughtfulness, and steady action. Each day brought new lessons, new insights, and new understanding. Tomas, in turn, continued to encourage her quietly. He asked questions that made her think, guided her actions without forcing them, and allowed her to make mistakes and learn from them. Nayeli realized that this gentle approach was teaching her not only how to care for the land and animals, but also how to trust herself. She felt a growing confidence in her own judgment, a sense that she could navigate challenges without fear or hesitation. One evening, as they sat watching the stars, Nayeli spoke about her village and her family. She shared memories, stories, and traditions, and Tomas listened with genuine interest. In these moments, Nayeli felt that she was not just learning from him, but also sharing herself and her culture. She realized that trust was built through sharing and listening, and that kindness often grew from understanding and connection. The days continued with steady work, reflection, and learning. Nayeli and Tomas built a routine, one that balanced effort and rest, observation and action. Nayeli noticed the harmony of life on the ranch, the way each creature, plant, and human contributed to the whole. She began to understand the interconnectedness of life and the responsibility that came with awareness and care. By the end of the third week, Nayeli felt that she had not only learned about the ranch, but about herself. She had faced uncertainty and fear, and had found calm, curiosity, and understanding in their place. The ranch had become a space of growth, and Tomas a guide in the quiet lessons of life. She realized that appearances could be deceiving, and that people often held depths that were revealed only through patience and observation. As the sun set on another day, Nayeli felt a sense of peace and fulfillment. She understood that trust and understanding required time, that kindness often came quietly, and that life's lessons were best learned through observation, reflection, and gentle action. She looked at Tomas, feeling gratitude for his guidance, and at the land, feeling awe for its beauty and rhythm. For the first time since leaving her village, Nayeli felt truly present, aware, and ready to continue her journey of learning and discovery. One morning, Nayeli woke to a gentle light spilling across the room, accompanied by the soft sounds of birds calling in the trees. The air was crisp, and the smell of fresh earth drifted through the open window. She stretched and looked around, feeling a quiet contentment. Life on the ranch had settled into a rhythm, each day carrying its own lessons, each moment offering something to observe and understand. Yet, there was a sense of anticipation she could not shake, a feeling that today might bring something different, something important. After breakfast, Tomas approached Nayeli with a serious but gentle expression. "There is something I need to explain," he said, leading her to a shaded spot under a large oak tree. Nayeli's curiosity piqued. She had come to trust him and knew that when he spoke in this tone it was something significant. She followed quietly, her mind alert but calm. Tomas began slowly, choosing his words carefully. "When you arrived here, I knew you might be afraid. The journey across the plains is not easy, and there are dangers along the way, but I want you to understand why you were brought here." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Nayeli listened intently, her eyes fixed on him, trying to anticipate what he might reveal. He explained that the journey she had undertaken had placed her in potential danger, not from him, but from others who might have wished to cause harm. He had arranged for her to come to the ranch in a way that would ensure her safety, knowing that the long distance and his careful planning would protect her until she arrived. Nayeli's eyes widened. The fear she had felt during the journey, the uncertainty, the tension, had not been meaningless. She realized that every step she had taken had been carefully considered, and that her safety had been the priority all along. Thomas continued, speaking with quiet authority and honesty. I did not want to frighten you unnecessarily, so I allowed the journey to appear uncertain. It was important that you learn to trust your instincts and your own strength. You have done so admirably. Nayeli felt a mixture of relief, surprise, and gratitude. She had assumed the worst when she first arrived, imagining danger at every turn. But the truth was far different. What she had feared as a threat had actually been a path to protection and understanding. For the first time since arriving at the ranch, Nayeli saw Tomas not only as a guide, but as someone who had planned carefully for her well-being. She realized that appearances could be deceiving. The man she had feared might have been dangerous, had been her protector all along. Her heart swelled with a quiet respect, a recognition of the thoughtfulness behind his actions. Tomas then spoke about the values he held most dear: care, observation, patience, and understanding. Life teaches us lessons in many ways, he said. Sometimes the lessons are gentle. Sometimes they appear harsh, but the intention behind actions can reveal the truth. It is important to see the difference. Nayeli absorbed his words, reflecting on her own journey. She thought about the fears she had carried, the moments of uncertainty, and the gradual realization that the world was often more complex than it appeared. Over the following days, Thomas began to show Nayeli more of the ranch's secrets. He taught her how to read the weather by observing the clouds, how to anticipate the needs of animals by watching their behavior, and how to care for plants by noticing subtle changes in leaves and stems. Nayeli became increasingly skilled, her confidence growing with each task. She realized that every lesson was part of a larger understanding, a way of seeing the world with patience, awareness, and thoughtfulness. One afternoon, Tomas led Nayeli to a hidden area near the edge of the property. A small stream wound through the land, bordered by lush vegetation. "This place is special," he said. "It reminds us that even in a vast, harsh landscape, there are pockets of life and calm. Sometimes we need to find these spaces to learn and reflect." Nayeli knelt by the stream, watching the water ripple over smooth stones. She felt a sense of wonder and peace. The ranch was not just a place of work, it was a living lesson teaching her about patience, care, and the hidden beauty in the world. As they walked back toward the house, Nayeli asked Tomas why he had chosen to help her in such a careful, deliberate way. Tomas smiled faintly. "I believe that every life has value. Everyone deserves a chance to be safe, to learn, and to grow. Sometimes that means planning carefully, sometimes quietly observing, and sometimes guiding without drawing attention to oneself." Nayeli nodded, feeling a deep appreciation for his wisdom. She realized that his actions were not just about safety, but about teaching her lessons she would carry for a lifetime. The bond between them deepened, built on trust, observation, and mutual respect. Nayeli began to see the ranch not only as a place of protection, but as a space where she could learn about herself and the world around her. Each day brought new insights: the way the sun moved across the sky, the subtle sounds of animals communicating, the patterns in plant growth. These observations became more than practical knowledge. They became lessons in patience, empathy, and awareness. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Nayeli reflected on her journey. She thought about the fear she had felt at the beginning, the uncertainty of being taken from her path, and the unexpected kindness she had discovered. She realized that sometimes what appears frightening at first can hide a deeper purpose. Her trust in Tomas had grown, not through words alone but through actions, consistency, and care. Tomas spoke quietly about the future. "There will be challenges ahead," he said, "but the lessons you are learning now will help you face them. Trust in yourself, in your observations, and in the knowledge you gain. And remember, kindness and patience can guide you through difficult times. Nayeli listened, absorbing every word. She felt stronger, wiser, and more prepared for whatever lay ahead. Over the next week, they focused on practical skills. Tomas showed Nayeli how to repair tools, how to maintain the fences and barns, and how to anticipate the needs of the land and animals. She discovered that careful attention to detail was essential and that every small action contributed to the greater balance of life on the ranch. She felt a sense of accomplishment with each task completed and pride in her growing abilities. Nayeli also began to notice the small, quiet gestures that revealed Tomas's character. He always ensured the animals had food and water before attending to other tasks. He listened attentively when she spoke, never interrupting or dismissing her observations. And when she made mistakes, he guided her gently, allowing her to learn without fear or frustration. These moments revealed the depth of his kindness and the careful thought behind his actions. One day, as they worked in the garden, Nayeli realized how much she had changed since arriving at the ranch. She was more patient, more observant, and more confident in her abilities. She understood that fear did not need to dominate her decisions, and that careful thought could guide her through uncertainty. The lessons of the ranch were not only practical but also deeply personal, shaping her understanding of the world and her place within it. In the evenings, they often walked to the edge of the property, watching the stars appear one by one in the vast sky. Nayeli marveled at the constellations, feeling a sense of connection to the land and the universe. Tomas spoke little during these walks, letting the natural beauty guide reflection and thought. Nayeli realized that wisdom often came in quiet moments, through observation, reflection, and a willingness to learn from the world around her. As the weeks passed, the story of her arrival became less about fear and more about understanding. Nayeli saw that her journey, though filled with uncertainty, had led her to a place of learning, growth, and unexpected kindness. She began to understand that trust was earned over time, through consistent actions and gentle guidance, and that appearances could be misleading. The man she had feared was not a threat, but a protector, a teacher, and a guide. By the end of Part 4, Nayeli's perspective had shifted completely. She no longer saw the ranch as a place of uncertainty, but as a space of growth and understanding. Tomas had revealed the truth behind her journey, and in doing so had shown her the power of careful planning, observation, and patience. She realized that the world was more complex than she had imagined, and that kindness often came quietly through consistent and thoughtful action. Nayeli felt gratitude for the lessons she had learned, for the trust she had built, and for the gentle guidance that had helped her grow. She understood that her journey was far from over, but she was ready to face whatever came next with confidence, awareness, and a deep appreciation for the hidden lessons in life. The morning sun rose over the ranch, painting the land in soft gold and long shadows. Nayeli stood near the edge of the property, taking in the familiar sights of barns, animals, and gently rolling hills. Her time at the ranch had been life-changing. The quiet lessons, the patient guidance, and the gentle presence of Tomas had reshaped how she saw the world and herself. Yet she knew that her journey was approaching a turning point. Soon she would return to her village, carrying with her the lessons she had learned. Tomas approached her with a small bundle in his hands. "You will need this on your journey," he said, handing her some supplies and a carefully prepared map. His eyes met hers, calm but knowing. Nayeli felt a wave of gratitude. She had arrived at the ranch uncertain and afraid, but she was leaving stronger, wiser, and with a deeper understanding of life. She nodded, smiling faintly, unsure if words could capture everything she felt. The journey back to her village was long, but different from her first trip. Nayeli moved with confidence, aware of the land, the wind, and the subtle signs of nature. Each step reminded her of what she had learned: patience, observation, and careful attention to her surroundings. She thought about Tomas and the quiet lessons of the ranch, understanding that his guidance had given her more than practical skills. It had given her a new way of seeing the world. As she traveled, Nayeli reflected on the moments that had shaped her time at the ranch. She remembered tending the young animals, observing the plants, and learning to anticipate the needs of the land. She recalled the quiet conversations with Tomas, his stories of life, and the gentle wisdom in his actions. She realized that the fear and uncertainty of her first journey had prepared her to receive these lessons fully. Without that challenge, she might not have appreciated the depth of what she had learned. The desert landscape stretched endlessly before her, but Nayeli no longer felt intimidated by its vastness. She recognized its patterns, the way the wind shaped the sand, the movement of birds, and the subtle signs of water and shelter. Her senses were sharp, honed by weeks of careful observation and practice. She walked with quiet confidence, her steps measured and sure, aware of both the beauty and the challenges of the land. Along the way, she encountered travelers and fellow villagers returning from their journeys. Nayeli greeted them warmly, sharing small pieces of advice she had learned from Tomas about caring for animals, observing the land, and moving with awareness. Each interaction reminded her that knowledge was not only for oneself, but for sharing with others. She felt a sense of connection, realizing that the lessons of the ranch extended beyond its boundaries and could touch the lives of many. When Nayeli finally approached her village, she felt a mixture of excitement and reflection. The familiar sights of her home, the clustered homes, the smoke rising from hearths, and the laughter of children welcomed her warmly. She felt the comfort of belonging and the familiarity of life she had temporarily left behind. Yet, she also carried the awareness of how much she had changed. The experiences at the ranch had given her a new perspective, one that blended curiosity, patience, and confidence with the love she held for her home. Her family rushed to greet her, embracing her with joy and relief. They had worried about her journey and were eager to hear her story. Nayeli smiled, her heart full, as she shared her experiences carefully, choosing words that captured the lessons she had learned without overwhelming them. She spoke of the ranch, the animals, the plants, and the quiet guidance of Tomas. She explained how she had grown in confidence, patience, and understanding. Her family listened with amazement, realizing that she had returned not just safe, but transformed in spirit. Nayeli also shared the lessons of observation and care she had learned. She taught her siblings how to notice the subtle signs of plants needing water, how to watch for the behavior of animals, and how to approach challenges with calm attention. The village embraced these teachings, understanding that the knowledge Nayeli brought was valuable and practical. Her experiences became a bridge between the world she had left and the wisdom she had gained. Over the next days, Nayeli reflected on her journey in solitude, walking through the familiar paths of her village and observing the land around her. She realized that the lessons of the ranch were not limited to work or survival. They were about life itself. Patience, careful observation, thoughtful action, and trust were principles she could apply to all aspects of her life. She understood that her journey had been about more than physical travel. It had been a journey of growth, self-awareness, and understanding. Nayeli also thought often of Tomas and the quiet way he had guided her. She remembered his gentle encouragement, the way he allowed her to make mistakes and learn from them, and the patient manner in which he revealed the truths of her journey. She understood that his actions had been deliberate, and that he had placed her well-being above all else. This realization deepened her gratitude and respect, and she carried it as a quiet inspiration in her heart. The village elders noticed changes in Nayeli as well. She moved with a calm confidence, spoke with clarity, and approached challenges thoughtfully. They recognized the growth that had occurred during her time away and welcomed her contributions to village life with renewed appreciation. Nayeli felt a sense of pride, not in boasting of her abilities, but in knowing that she had learned lessons that could benefit others. One afternoon, as she walked along a path near the river, Nayeli paused to observe the water flowing over smooth stones. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the uncertainty, the challenges, and the unexpected kindness she had received. She realized that life was full of hidden lessons, and that patience, trust, and careful observation were the keys to uncovering them. She felt a sense of peace, knowing that her journey had given her tools not only for survival, but for understanding and wisdom. In the evenings, Nayeli would sit by the fire, reflecting on her experiences and sharing stories with younger members of the village. She spoke of the importance of patience, of noticing the small details in life, and of approaching others with kindness and understanding. Her stories inspired curiosity and respect, showing that wisdom could come from both experience and observation. Nayeli's time at the ranch had become a living lesson, one she could now pass on to others. As weeks turned into months, Nayeli continued to integrate the lessons of the ranch into her daily life. She helped her family with work, cared for the animals, tended to plants, and guided others in observing the world around them. Each day became an opportunity to apply what she had learned, to share knowledge, and to grow further. She felt a strong sense of purpose, knowing that her journey had transformed her in ways that extended far beyond her own experience. Nayeli also found herself reflecting on trust and understanding. She had arrived at the ranch expecting fear and uncertainty, only to discover patience, care, and guidance. She realized that the world often contained hidden kindness, and that first impressions could be misleading. She learned that careful observation, listening, and thoughtful action could reveal the truth behind appearances, and that trust could grow even in the most unexpected circumstances. One evening, Nayeli looked out over the village as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey, for the lessons, for Tomas, and for the quiet ways in which life had guided her. She understood that her experiences were not simply about survival, but about growth, understanding, and connection. She carried these lessons with her, ready to face the future with confidence, curiosity, and a sense of wonder. As night fell and stars filled the sky, Nayeli reflected on the path she had traveled. She thought about the fear she had felt, the uncertainty of being taken from her path, and the unexpected kindness that had guided her. She realized that life was full of challenges, but also full of lessons, beauty, and hidden support. With patience, careful observation, and trust, she could navigate the world with confidence and clarity. Nayeli's return to her village was not the end of her journey, but the beginning of a new chapter. She had discovered the value of learning through experience, the importance of careful observation, and the quiet power of trust and kindness. She had learned that the world could surprise her in the most unexpected ways, and that guidance and support often came quietly, without fanfare or demand. With each passing day, Nayeli shared her knowledge, applied her lessons, and lived with awareness and care. She remained connected to the memories of the ranch and the teachings of Tomas, understanding that her growth was ongoing and that life always had something new to reveal. She had traveled far, learned deeply, and returned home transformed, not just by the journey, but by the lessons she carried in her heart. Nayeli understood now that courage was not only facing danger, but also being open to learning, being patient, and trusting oneself and others. She had arrived at the ranch with uncertainty and fear, but she left it with knowledge, confidence, and a new understanding of life's hidden lessons. Her journey had taught her that sometimes the greatest guidance comes from those who act quietly, thoughtfully, and with care, and that the world often holds more kindness than one might expect. As she looked up at the stars one last time before sleeping, Naeli felt a deep peace. Her journey had been challenging, yet it had also been beautiful and transformative. She carried with her the lessons of the ranch, the patience, observation, trust, and understanding that would guide her for the rest of her life. And with that knowledge, she knew she was ready to face whatever the future might hold, with courage, wisdom, and a heart open to the hidden lessons of the world.